Welcome to a brand new installment of Sound Off Extra here on the official YouTube channel for the Solomonster Sounds Off podcast. I am the Solomonster, and I have a good one here for you this time. It is my first WWE DVD review in I can't even tell you how long. I can't even tell you how long the last time it was that I bought a WWE DVD until now. A couple months ago, I bought one that I had been looking forward to for most of the year. It was announced earlier this year, came out in September. Here we are in November as I am recording this. But it's taken me this long to actually, A, sit down and record this, but B, get through the entire DVD set because it is a big one. It is 3 discs, it is 8.5 hours total, and it is WWE Unreleased. Never before seen matches, 1986 to 1995. Although, on the back cover of the DVD, in 2 different places no less, it says 1985 to 1996, as opposed to 86 to 95. I'm not sure how that got by, but it did. Perhaps this could be a still shot for Matthew to use in a future Botchamania video, if he hasn't already. Now, this is one I was very excited about. Again, it takes a lot, I should say, to get me to buy a WWE DVD. I just don't buy them anymore. You know, everything I need is pretty much on the network. And I think soon enough DVDs will fully go to the wayside. And I'm one of those people who would love to see them take what would be these DVD releases and just put them right on the network for people who are paying $9.99 a month. But when I heard about this, I knew I had to pick it up. There's a lot of content on here from what people call the golden age of WWE, which was the era that I grew up on. You know, you're talking 1980s, mainly mid to late 80s, early 90s. I grew up on Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Macho Man Randy Savage, Million Dollar Man, Rick Rude, Ultimate Warrior, Mr. Perfect, Bobby Heenan, all those guys. And there's a lot of that on here, although, again, the DVD set does go into the mid-90s, so it goes even farther than that. Now, there will be some spoilers here. For those of you who didn't know about this DVD, for those of you who have been on the fence, although I don't know why you would be since it came out 2 months ago, but a lot of people listening to this probably do not have the DVD, maybe didn't even know it was out. Just so you know, there will be some spoilers on here. There will be some match outcomes. I'm not going to give away the results to every single match, but this is just about me giving my own random thoughts and observations, match by match. And giving you a rundown of all the matches that you can look forward to on this thing. 45 of them in total. 45 matches. That's a lot of matches. Some good ones, there's a lot of bad ones. But as I said earlier, it's 3 discs, 8.5 hours total. It's hosted by Charlie Caruso, who you can see every Monday night on Raw, and Sean Mooney. Yes, they dug up Sean freaking Mooney, and I could not be happier for this DVD. Right? Before there was a Seth freaking Rollins, there was a Seth freaking, or say, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Sean freaking Mooney, there you go. Who, as the story goes, it's an actual ongoing storyline during this DVD set, where Charlie is hosting this thing. She finds Sean in the WWE warehouse. Apparently, he never left. He never left the WWE warehouse. Now, he denies this. He denies that he lives there. Although Charlie has her suspicions about this as the DVD goes on. But this is the WWE warehouse where they keep all of the master tapes. And he basically lives there like a troll. And still wears the old WWF jacket that he used to wear in the late 80s. Now, I'm in the interest of full disclosure here, I am taking a full point off this thing right off the bat for not including the famed Bret Hart versus Tom Magee match, which I believe was from 1986. We've all heard a lot about this match. Bret's talked about it. It's become the thing of legend in WWE. Wrestlers, when you're in the company, when you're in NXT, you're able to request a match from the archives for them to take out and show you. People have allegedly requested this match, and this match is off limits. Nobody can see this match. Although I think Bret has said in the past he has a copy of it in his personal collection. I don't know if that's true or not. If that match happened in '86 and it never did air on TV, it would have been perfect for a DVD set like this, and it's not on here. I take a point off. So you know, there is no commentary. Absolutely no commentary for any of the 45 matches on this DVD. So if you are a fan of commentary, especially from back then, whether it was Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura, Vince and Bobby, any combination of those guys, Lord Alfred Hayes, you're not going to find it on here. It's not on here. Now, I thought that would bother me. Honestly, it didn't really bother me at all, and if anything, I kind of liked it that way. I appreciated it. It took me back, especially the way some of these matches are shot. It almost made me feel like I was there, like at a house show back then where you have no commentary. So I don't know that you'll feel that way. It didn't bother me. It may bother you, but just be aware of that. So starting with Disc 1, first match on here is Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, and Bobby the Brain Heenan taking on Hulk Machine, Big Machine, and Super Machine. It's the machines from Japan. That was the gimmick. And it's funny because the machines from Japan come out to Real American. So I found that to be amusing. And it was, obviously, I mean, you remember the Mr. America angle they did with Hogan back in, I guess it would have been 2002 or 2003. This was the precursor to that going back many years. It was clearly Hulk Hogan. He came out dressed up as one of the machines. I don't remember offhand exactly what the storyline was, or if it was just a house show gimmick. I don't ever remember seeing him doing this on television. But you watch Hogan here, and Hogan is just the best. I mean, this is a guy who, it's easy to forget. You know, Hogan has had he's been involved, unfortunately, in a lot of situations in the later part of his career, the later part of his life, that haven't painted him in the best light, going back to the Hogan Knows Best show and the sex tape and all the other stuff. And God knows, you know, Hogan has said a lot of ridiculous, crazy stuff before. And people talk about, you know, holding people back and the politics. But the thing you got to remember about Hogan, and the reason that he ascended to the heights that he did in the first place and was put in the position he was in, is because this guy's got charisma for days. If Vince McMahon can somehow find a way to take the charisma that Hulk Hogan had, especially at his peak back in the mid to late 80s, and infuse that into Roman Reigns, you know, take Roman's look and the vest and all that and give him Hogan's charisma, he would be on cloud 9. He would have an unstoppable force who would be on top of the company for decades to come, right? Too bad he can't do that. But Hulk had all the charisma in the world. And again, similar to the Mr. America stuff with the Hulk machine here, later on at the end of the match, he lifts up the mask, he reveals himself. It was weird watching this, knowing that they would basically repeat the same angle 15 years later. So again, I'm not giving the results to every single match. Again, random observations mixed in here with some more detailed stuff. But that's the first thing that struck me about watching this match. There was another match on here that was kind of wild to see. It was actually a tag team match. It was Paul Orndorff and King Harley Race, not King Kong Bundy, taking on Hulk Hogan and Rowdy Roddy Piper from December of 1986. Hogan and Piper in 86 as tag team partners. So this was weird to see. It was wild. And it's one of those things, you know, when you're growing up, how do you know? Unless you go to these shows, how do you know that, you know, in some other part of the country, Hogan and Piper are teaming up together as partners and they're not at each other's throats like you're used to seeing them on TV. So this was kind of wild to see. And we had the Dingo Warrior. Dingo Warrior, that name may ring a bell because that was the gimmick Ultimate Warrior used down in, I believe, World Class, long before he came to WWE. And they have the Dingo Warrior against Jose Estrada from June of 1987. And I made a note here. It's the only note I made about this match. I don't know. I don't even remember who won, because by now I watched this match 2 months ago. Obviously, we know who won. Stupid question. But I just have one line that I wrote here. The Dingo Warrior from Queens, New York. That's how they announced him. I don't know that Warrior has ever even been in Queens, New York before, let alone hails from there. But that's how they announced him. This was long before Parts Unknown, I guess, or wherever he actually is from. I think he's from Arizona, I think. I don't know, but he ain't from Queens, New York. I'd be very surprised to hear that. So I laughed. We had an unmasked pre-Blue Blazer Owen Hart defeating Barry Horowitz. This was a match from March of 1988. Horowitz looked absolutely horrible in this match. He delivered a super kick at one point, Horowitz did, and he fell down. Owen won with a diving headbutt off the top. He hit Horowitz, who was literally on the opposite side of the ring. So Owen Hart, an amazing athlete. What a shocking statement that was, or that is to make. We had Andre the Giant and the Macho Man Randy Savage for the WWE Championship, April 21st, 1988. And if you don't know the history with Savage and Andre, Andre hated Randy Savage. The reason why depends on who you ask. Randy's brother, Lanny, claims that it was because Andre hated baby oil, and Savage insisted on using baby oil, and that would piss off Andre to no end. Andre's daughter once said that the real reason her dad hated Randy Savage was because he was caught using steroids one day, and Andre did not tolerate that stuff. By the way, both of these excuses I find to be comical. Comical on the steroid thing because, you know, let's be honest here, probably 90% of that locker room back then was using steroids in some form or fashion, including Hulk Hogan. And it's comical, the baby oil thing is comical because Hogan also drenched himself in baby oil. He came out all shiny, shinier than a bald man's skull. So both of those things I kind of laugh at. And again, for all the matches that Andre worked against Hogan, and they worked a lot, not just Mania 3 and that one TV match where Andre won the belt for about 2 seconds, but they worked a lot before, Shea Stadium and some other house show matches. For all the matches Andre worked against Hogan, I never heard the same stories about Andre hating Hogan in the way that he hated Randy Savage. So who knows what the real explanation is. Put it this way, when I think of baby oil and steroids back then, Randy Savage ain't the first person who comes to mind. It was the earliest Savage match that I have ever seen is on this disc with the Ultimate Warrior. That is also here on disc 1. In fact, let me just bring up the date of this match here so those of you are aware of it. Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior, here it is, from April of 1989. I'm not sure if that was the first time they ever set foot in the ring together, but it's the earliest that I've ever seen them in the ring together. This was nowhere near the level of their WrestleMania 7 match or anything like that. I wouldn't expect it to be. And you're going to hear me as I go along here making comments like this, and I do so with an asterisk next to everything because I understand these were dark matches. These were not matches that even have commentary. They never aired on TV. They were never intended to air on TV. You know, so there's no storyline, you know, reason for doing things, and who wins and loses isn't as important if it's not airing on TV. I am judging it a little bit against that lens, but I'm trying to be fair here. But so, you know, you may catch me doing that a few times. I get it. I know these were not overly important matches, but still, I need something to grade these things against here. So yeah, not as good as their WrestleMania match or anything like that, but it was still a good match. It was still a good match. I mean, the one thing you notice here is that Warrior's best opponent, and I'm a big fan of Rick Rude in the matches he had with Warrior. He'd be number 2 on the list, but number 1, best opponent that the Ultimate Warrior ever had was Randy Savage. They had a great chemistry. Savage made him look like $1 million. They just worked well together, even here in this match. Now, this was right after WrestleMania 5, when he had linked up with Sherry as his new manager, but pre-Macho King. So it was almost like this weird sort of purgatory that he was in until he became the Macho King. Rick Rude, ironically, who I just mentioned, walked out with the Intercontinental Championship that he had just won to distract the Warrior, which today would lead to the inevitable distraction roll-up, but this is the Ultimate Warrior we're talking about here. You won't find too many Warrior pinfall losses, and this was no exception. He attacked Rick Rude, fought him to the back, and got counted out. But then he came back out, celebrated to his music, so there was no doubt who the real winner was. It was the Ultimate Warrior. There was actually another Warrior Savage match on this DVD. I'm not sure why they included 2 of them when they easily could have included Bret Hart and Tom McGee, but I digress. This one was from early 1990. Savage by now was the Macho King. Warrior had the Intercontinental title back. The title was on the line in this match. They aired the hard camera view for the entire thing, from the entrances right on through the match. They even had the time code on the bottom. And there are a lot of matches on these 3 discs that have that static hard camera angle and a time code on the bottom. I mean, this really is ripped right from the archives here. You could tell. And there were matches where, quite frankly, the video quality isn't even all that great. Now, I eat this shit up. I love stuff like this. But I could see where other people or younger fans who aren't used to seeing this might think, what the hell am I paying for this for? Because it's rare. That's why. It's rare stuff. But anyway, had a time code on the bottom of the screen the entire time. It looks like fan cam footage. That's a great way to describe it, I think, that somebody shot in the audience. Funniest part of, and this is again the second Warrior Savage match on here, the funniest part was Mike McGurk, ring announcer, Mike McGurk, announcing the Warrior as quickly as she possibly could, and then literally running out of the ring to avoid being clobbered by this guy. And you know what? I don't blame her. I've joked on my podcast, one of the funniest things I ever saw. There was a WWF house show from Madison Square Garden around 1990. There was a 6-man tag. It was the Ultimate Warrior teaming with LOD shortly after they came into the company against Demolition. I think it was all 3 members. So it would have been Warrior, Hawk and Animal against Axe, Smash, and Crush. It was in Madison Square Garden. It did air on TV. It aired locally on the MSG network. And I will never forget this as long as I live. Warrior, who was the champion at the time, came down the short aisleway like a bat out of hell. You know Warrior. And as he is running around the ring, just sprinting at top speed, where there's barely enough room to even move around, he collided with a ringside technician who was, I guess, leaning up against the ring, like the ring apron. He basically like shoulder tackled him and never stopped. Warrior never stopped at all. It was almost like, you know, hitting a speed bump, but just he kept on going. That's what Warrior did. But this guy, his hair went one way, his body went the other, and he fell to the floor. And Howard Finkel inside saw this. He immediately jumped out of the ring to go check on the guy. But I swear to God, his hair went one way, his body went the other. If you go on YouTube and you search for like Warrior entrance botch, or I don't know what you have to type in, it's on YouTube. I know that for a fact. Go find this thing. It's the funniest thing I ever saw. So I don't blame Mike McGurk at all if that's what she was trying to do. She's trying to save her own life because this guy is a maniac, and he would have tackled her just like he would have tackled anybody else. There's a Ted DiBiase Dusty Rhodes match on here shortly after Dusty came into the company, pre-Polka Dot. So there's no polka dots. That tells you right there how early this was in his run. All I kept thinking watching it, whenever he would do something with Virgil, because Virgil was outside the ring, was Virgil is attacking Virgil. Because, of course, Virgil is Dusty's real name. And the belief has always been that they gave DiBiase, a manager named Virgil, who it was almost like his slave. And they gave him that name as like a rib on Dusty, and I wouldn't be surprised if that were the truth. I think I've heard Bobby Heenan tell that story before. So, yep, very interesting to see pre-Polka Dot Dusty, who was over. I mean, he was really, really over with the crowd, and could have been a much bigger deal if, they wanted him to be a bigger deal. I get the sense, especially from the Polka Dot stuff, that they didn't really care to have Dusty Rhodes be a top guy in the company, because if they would have let him loose, he would have easily been a top 5 guy in that company. There was a Bryan Adams tryout. Bryan Adams, better known as Crush. This was one of his tryout matches that they included here on this disc. It was against Barry Horowitz back in 1989. Bryan Adams' finisher? A tombstone pile driver. We had another tryout. There were a bunch of them on here. Earthquake Evans. Managed by Slick, and yes, it is the Earthquake that you're thinking of. Managed by Slick, coming out to Jive Soul Bro. So imagine Earthquake coming to the ring to Jive Soul Bro, wearing a plaid shirt with jeans and shoes. This was quite the look for Earthquake here in this tryout match. We had a match between the Rockers and the Powers of Pain that ends on a disqualification when Mr. Fuji trips Shawn Michaels. They beat down Marty Jannetty after the match until I was going to give you 3 guesses about who ran out to make the save, but you'll never guess, so I'll just tell you. Hulk Hogan makes the save with a steel chair. Yes, Hulk Hogan saving the Rockers from the Powers of Pain. This was bizarre. That's all I can say. Hulk Hogan making the save for Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. I mentioned earlier the second Warrior Savage match for the Intercontinental title. That was at this point in the DVD. This is the fan cam looking match with the time code. By the time we get to the Ultimate Warrior and Texas Tornado against Rick Rude and Mr. Perfect, I realize that of the 10 men involved in the last 4 matches, 8 of them are now dead, including all 4 men in that tag team match. That's the one thing about watching these matches back. Like, as much as I love doing it, and it's the era of wrestling I grew up on, it's depressing as hell to see all of these guys, not one of whom even made it out of their 50s. It's very depressing. This was a SummerSlam 1990 preview, which had Kerry Von Erich beating Perfect on that show, if you remember, to win the IC title, and Rude challenging Warrior in a cage match for the WWF title. If this were today, this would have been a main event on Raw the week before SummerSlam, and there would have been at least 2 commercial breaks during the match. Thankfully, we didn't have to deal with that here. But it was a nice little, gem of a match, Warrior and Tornado, who were actually really good friends in real life, against Rick Rude and Mr. Perfect, who were practically best friends in real life. We had Demolition against the Legion of Doom. Demolition comes out to new, much crappier heel theme music, wearing these weird hooded masks, which they wore during the match, which was even more weird. I don't know why the hell they were wearing them during the match. Crush and Axe wrestled the match with Smash outside the ring. Hawk came off the top with a clothesline and pinned Axe. And Axe just rolled out of the ring and walked to the back like nothing. And you could tell they did not want to be there. You could see it in just their body language. They did not want to be there. And it is sickening to look back at how WWE treated Demolition after LOD came in. Because Demolition back then, I don't care what anybody says, okay? Maybe if you grew up an NWA fan, you didn't care for Demolition. You looked at them as nothing more than an LOD ripoff. But I'll tell you this, as somebody who grew up a fan back then, young fan of WWE, didn't really know much about it. I knew of the Road Warriors, but I didn't watch them. I was a big Demolition fan. Demolition back then was the shit, okay? And to see how they treated this tag team, once LOD finally came in, once Vince McMahon managed to sign Hawk and Animal, it's just sickening to see what they did with Demolition, how they just buried those guys, absolutely buried them. They went from winning the tag team titles at WrestleMania 6, big show, right? 67,000 people, big win over Andre and Haku, and getting this giant ovation, to jobbing out to Tenryu and Kitao at WrestleMania 7 a year later. And they were only brought in, the Japanese guys were, for that one match. They brought these guys in. Nobody knew who they were. I mean, Tenryu was a famous guy, but let's be honest, how many people in the crowd that night at WrestleMania in LA knew who the hell these 2 guys were? And they brought them in for one match because WWF at the time had this working relationship with, I think it was the SWS promotion over in Japan. At least I think that was the genesis of why this happened. One match against Demolition, and they beat them. And they beat Demolition. Last time we saw Demolition at a WrestleMania. The way I see it, there were 2 nails in the coffin for Demolition. The main one being the arrival of LOD, but the other being the loss of the Rick Derringer song. And I think it had to do with some sort of rights issue. That's why it had to be changed. But that music was such a big part of that gimmick. They were dead without it. They really were. They were dead without it. The closest thing I could think of today might be Bobby Roode. I love Bobby Roode. I'm a big Bobby Roode fan. But if you take away the theme song, especially as just Bobby Roode the babyface, which I think is terrible, but if you take away the theme song, he is not nearly as popular as he is. That's how important a theme song can be to a wrestler. That's how critical the right theme song can be. And I think Demolition is a prime example of that. There was a Tatanka tryout match from early 1991 when they were billing him as War Eagle. And for some reason, he jogs to the ring to the tune of Crank It Up by Jimmy Hart from the old WWF Pile Driver album. At this point, I'm like, this DVD is fantastic, man. There's so much silly shit on here that I never even knew existed. This is just great. I knew Tatanka and all these guys had tryout matches, but why the hell is Tatanka coming out to a song from the Pile Driver album? That I don't know. All I know is that there has to be a volume 2. Now, I was curious because I always thought that he did not debut as Tatanka until early 1992. And in fact, he did debut on TV in early 92, so this guy had a year's worth of dark matches before they finally changed his name and put a red streak in his hair. But in looking it up, I'm pretty sure the date they have listed here on the DVD is wrong, which is shocking, I know, considering they have 2 errors on the back of the DVD cover on the back. But they have it as January 8th, 1991, but it looks like the match actually happened on February 19th. They did have a show on January 8th, but he was not on that card. The next match was quite the rare find. A blindfold match between Jake the Snake Roberts and Rick the Model Martel. A full 2 months before their blindfold match at WrestleMania 7. This one was similar. Jake would point, crowd would help guide him in the right direction. There was a lot of dead time in the middle of this thing. It got very boring. Martel finally had enough. He ripped the blindfold off his head. Jake hit the DDT, felt his way around, found Rick, pinned him. This was their test run, I guess, for WrestleMania. That one, though, was way more entertaining than this one. We got a Ted DiBiase-Sid Justice match from 1991, a month before SummerSlam. Mike McGurk introduced Sid as hailing from any place he wants to be. And he came to the ring to no music. The old Bob Backlund theme. He won with a powerbomb. Here's a fun fact. Sid's very first WWF appearance was a segment at a TV taping in May of that year that never aired. He came out to accept the Mounties' open invitation to fight anybody in the building. You would never know, though. You would never know that if you look at Sid's Wikipedia page. Because there, I noticed, it says Sid debuted in an untelevised segment that saw him clear the ring of the Mountie following Mountie's open offer of sex. And hey, if it's on Wikipedia, it must be true. Now we know why that segment never aired on TV. Undertaker against the Ultimate Warrior in a casket match from August of 1991. This would have been days before SummerSlam when Warrior was fired. This also may have been the very first casket match that they ever did in WWE. I know there was a casket match years earlier involving Dusty Rhodes, I think back in the 70s. But as far as WWE goes, this may have been the very first casket match. I know they did a bunch of them after this, but the first one that ever was televised was not until Survivor Series in '92. That was the match against Kamala. Casket matches are rarely any good. You want to see a great casket match? Okay, go watch Phoenix and Mil Muertes in the first season of Lucha Underground. Even the casket match that Daniel Bryan had with Kane on SmackDown a few years ago. That was one of the better ones I've actually ever seen. This was not one of them, but what do you expect? Finkel announced this as a bonus match for the live crowd, and it is Undertaker and the Ultimate Warrior, so don't go into it expecting Savage and Steamboat, and you'll be fine. We got a Ric Flair versus Roddy Piper match from October 1st, 1991. Very shortly after Flair debuted in the WWF, he comes out wearing the big gold belt around his waist. No video distortion here. I guess there wouldn't be since this never did air on TV. This was a fun nostalgia trip, you know, but as a match, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. There was a ref bump near the end. Another ref came down. Flair hit a low blow on Piper and rolled him up with a fistful of tights for the pin. Now, Flair had brought a chair into the ring earlier in the match. Piper grabbed it. He went to go use it, but the original referee, now back on his feet, grabbed it out of Piper's hands, and when he turned around, Flair rolled him up with a second schoolboy, got the pin for the second time. I guess the first one didn't count. It was rare to see Roddy Piper do a job for anybody, let alone do 2 jobs in one match. But he and Flair go way back. I'm sure he was more than happy to do what he could to help Flair get over once he made the jump over to WWE. Piper went nuts after the match with the chair. He hit Flair with it. He swung it at the officials who tried to stop him. This was cool to see only because we never got a Flair-Piper singles match on TV. Even though they feuded, Flair and Hogan, or I should say Flair with Hogan, and Piper immediately after he debuted. I mean, Flair debuted on TV in September of '91. Within a matter of weeks, he was already locked in feuds with Piper and Hulk Hogan, which ultimately never really went anywhere, I guess, now did they? But he was feuding with those two guys. We never got to see either one of those matches on a pay-per-view or anything. And yet they did a heavy angle at a challenge taping that one time where Flair went after Piper at the announce desk, and this huge brawl broke out that ended with Vince McMahon taking a chair shot to the back, which I think was probably the first bump Vince ever took. But yet we never got to see a Flair-Piper singles match until now, here on this DVD. Sean Mooney. Now, they do cutaways here throughout the DVD back to Mooney and Charlie Caruso in the warehouse doing comedy, and oh, look what I found, look what I found. So Sean Mooney gives Charlie Caruso a little history lesson, showing highlights of the Ultimate Warrior beating Randy Savage in a career-ending match at WrestleMania 7, and the wedding reception after SummerSlam where Jake the Snake and Undertaker attacked Macho Man. He says even though Savage was no longer allowed to wrestle, he used a loophole to wrestle as Mr. Madness in some non-televised matches against Jake the Snake, which is this next match here. Jake Roberts against Mr. Madness, who comes to the ring to the Macho Man's theme song. The Macho Man's hometown is where he's announced from. He is dressed exactly as the Macho Man. He literally changed nothing about his appearance. I thought he would at least wear a mask, like Hulk Machine, or like Dusty did as the Midnight Rider, okay? Or Hogan as Mr. America. But nope, it was literally just a different name. On that November 12, 1991 show, not only did we get Savage and Jake, but we got a Hulk Hogan versus Ric Flair singles match. So what did I just talk about, right? We never got to see Hogan versus Flair or Piper versus Flair on TV. On this disc alone, you get Piper versus Flair and Hogan versus Flair. This card from November 12, 1991 is the card that WrestleMania 8 should have been. It should have been Hogan versus Flair and Savage against Jake, blowing off the feud at WrestleMania instead of some random Saturday Night's Main Event episode. Hogan against Flair with Mr. Perfect at ringside for the WWF title. Flair is out there wearing the big gold belt. Hogan has the WWF title around his waist. It is weird seeing those two titles in the same ring at the same time. This was the easiest match in the world. These two guys were in a masterclass unto themselves. 5 minutes went by before they even touched. They didn't even touch, and the entire time the crowd was making noise. Nobody was sitting down, nobody was sitting on their hands, and this was the main event after a long night of taping. I looked up those TV tapings from that date. They had something like 30 matches that night, okay? 60-something% or 70% of the matches on this DVD set. That's what they had that one night. Now, granted, a lot of them were short squashes, probably 2-3 minute matches, but these were marathon tapings back in the day. People sitting there sometimes for 4 hours long, but they were alive for this match. This is what their WrestleMania 8 match honestly should have been. That's what this was, minus the count-out finish. Lots of stalling early on. Flair's bumping around for Hogan like a madman. Hogan no-selling a lot of Flair's offense, so some things never change. Flair cheats to gain the advantage, works over the leg. Hogan hulks up, makes a comeback. Match ended when Hogan made it back into the ring just in time to beat the 10 count. A little disappointing for what would have been one of the first Hogan-Flair matches. They did a lot of matches in October, November that year, Madison Square Garden. This wasn't the first one, but this was one of the early ones. But like I said, easiest match in the world to work. If guys can work matches like this all the time, then they might actually make it into their 50s and 60s and not be completely crippled down and broken. There's a Piper's Pit segment from April of 1992, about a week after WrestleMania 8, when Piper lost his IC title to Bret Hart. He starts off by talking about Mike Tyson being in jail, Buster Douglas being arrested for drunk driving, and half the WWF wrestlers, he says, are in a scandal. So now we know why this segment never aired, okay? Then he bashes Geraldo Rivera. He calls Geraldo a jerk. He says Geraldo claims to be so proud of his Mexican heritage, and then points out that when he started out, he used to go by the name Johnny Rivers. Now this is Piper pointing this out. He's like, oh, he's so proud of his Mexican heritage. When he started out, he was going by the name Johnny Rivers. Now, I don't know how true that is, but the implication there being that he was ashamed, I guess, to go by his actual name. This all stems, if you're wondering, why the hell would Roddy Piper be going off on Geraldo Rivera? Well, this all stems from an expose that Geraldo did on the WWF that aired about a week before this show. He covered all of the sex scandal stuff with Pat Patterson and Terry Garvin and Mel Phillips. Mel Phillips being the African-American ring announcer for many years. You will see him on some old WWF matches and clips from like the late 80s. I don't even know. By 90, he was probably gone already, but like the mid to late 80s. And I think with him, it was something with him and ring boys and their feet. Disgusting shit that's not worth going into. But anyway, that was part of the expose that Geraldo did. He even interviewed Rita Chatterton. Geraldo interviewed Rita Chatterton on the show that he did, who went by the name Rita Marie as a referee in WWE. She was WWE's first official full-time referee. She had claimed that Vince McMahon raped her in the back of a limousine. So at least we have some context for why Piper said the things he said here. I just wanted to give you that context so you understood. So he brings out the Brooklyn Brawler, of all people, who says that he's going to be the next world champion. And Piper points out that he's never seen him win a match before. How are you going to be champion? And Brawler was ahead of his time. Today we have Jinder Mahal. Had Brawler come along today, he may well have realized that dream of becoming WWE champion. But he was about 30 years ahead of his time, this guy. He mocked Piper for losing to Bret Hart at WrestleMania. He brings a ring bell into the ring. He points out that when Piper had the chance to use the bell on Bret, he didn't do it. And Piper pokes him in the eyes, picks up the bell, waffles him with it. This was the definition of time filler and is easily the worst Piper's Pit segment that I've ever seen. Bret Hart against the British Bulldog, a full 2 months before their SummerSlam main event at Wembley Stadium. This was wild, seeing these two wrestle in 1992 and not having it be their SummerSlam match. First half was pretty dull. It was mostly arm drags, rest holds, but it did pick up. Both guys take a tumble out over the top to the floor. Bulldog gets back in first. He goes to suplex Bret back inside, but Bret does a go behind and of all things wins with a bridging German suplex and the fastest count, I swear, that you will ever see. This was from referee Joey Morella. You would think he just remembered that he left the stove on at home or something. That's how fast this count was. His count was so fast he counted 3 before he even hit 2. Both guys shake hands after the match. Bret gives him a pat on the ass at the end. Good match. Good match. A nice little taste of what was to come at Wembley 2 months later. How's this for a match? Kamala and Papa Shango against Bret Hart and the Ultimate Warrior. 24 hours after Bret won the WWF title from Ric Flair in Saskatoon. This match was the next night in Regina, Saskatchewan. It was just bizarre to see Bret standing there with the title around his waist and then see Warrior come out, jacked to the gills to his music, sharing the same ring. Yet Bret was the one with the belt and not Warrior. Back then, this probably felt like Bizarro World, I'm sure. And in fact, they were in Canada, so according to WWE, they were in fact in Bizarro World. Naturally, Bret sold for most of the match. Not really a shock there. He gave Warrior the hot tag. Warrior came in, beat up Papa Shango, gave Kamala a body slam, gave Shango the shoulder tackle. Very weak-looking splash for the pin. And they celebrated to the Ultimate Warrior's theme music. I know Bret in his book talked about the idea that Warrior was going to put him over at the Royal Rumble the following year, or maybe it was WrestleMania, or at least that's what Bret claims he was told. Just watching them together here in the same ring, here in this match, there ain't no way in a million years that Warrior would have done the job for Bret. There is not a chance. The Undertaker against Bam Bam Bigelow, January 26, 1993. The video quality on this is absolutely hideous. This was probably the worst filmed match that they included on this entire DVD. It truly was fan cam footage. Hard camera shot only. Bigelow comes off the top rope with a headbutt. Undertaker does the zombie sit-up. Bigelow misses. Undertaker hits the second worst chokeslam of all time. After the one he gave Hogan in 2002 on that Judgment Day pay-per-view. And he gets the pin. Match was exactly what you would expect it to be from The Undertaker in 1993, which is to say, not very good. And then it was time. This was either the best or the worst part of this DVD. I have not decided which. Now, a little backstory is in order here. It is March of 1993. Dwayne Gill and Barry Hardy are job guys for WWE. If you grew up like I did on Superstars and Wrestling Challenge in the 80s and 90s, I guarantee that you saw these two guys plenty of times on TV. Always looking up at the lights. Dwayne Gill, Barry Hardy, Barry Horowitz, Reno Riggins, Iron Mike Sharp. Those are all names that you should recognize. So they're working independents, but they're also coming into work enhancement matches for a lot of these TV tapings, and they will do anything. They will do anything to get noticed. They will do anything to get on TV. So he and Hardy had these Ninja Turtle costumes made, okay, that they took with them whenever they were on the road. Because you never know when crime may break out, I guess. The Ninja Turtles must always be prepared. Dwayne Gill told this story on WWE.com. He said he would wear the costume in the locker room and he would dance around in it. Like a fool. And then one day he looks up and there's Vince McMahon. And Vince goes, "Who the hell is inside that thing?" And Gill takes off the mask. And Vince just goes, "I should have known. You got another one of those?" And he's like, "Well, as a matter of fact, yeah, we do." And he's like, "Put them on. You're wrestling in 10 minutes. And they come out for this match against two other job guys wearing these Ninja Turtle knockoff costumes. It was so patently obvious that they were Ninja Turtle ripoffs, but they couldn't go by that name for obvious reasons. You know, the Shredder would have come after them. That, and they would have gotten hit with a cease and desist faster than the Young Bucks did. So instead, they called them the Toxic Turtles, Tom and Terry. One of them's got the red sash across his eyes. The other has a purple one. So I guess they were Raphael and Donatello. Donatello goes for a cover at one point. The other guy kicks out. And he lands on his back. But he has a shell, you see. So he starts kicking his feet around like he can't get up because he's on his shell. So Raphael runs in. He has to roll him over. People start booing the match. They turned on the match. They were apparently willing to give this a chance when they first came out. They gave it another 90 seconds after that, but the shell thing was just too much for them to bear. They won the match. Imagine having to be the other two guys, right? Jobbing for a couple of turtles. I don't think I ever saw these other two job guys again, so it's possible they went to the back and they just quit on the spot and went home. But in any event, Dwayne Gill said that when he got to the back, Vince was laughing his ass. Oh, I'm sure he was. I'm sure. I could picture that right now. Vince McMahon cackling like a madman. This sounds like something that would be right up his alley. So yes, future light heavyweight champion Gillberg was once a Ninja Turtle in WWE. Those are the first two discs in a nutshell. Get it? Shell, turtles. Anyway, I finally made it to disc 3. This was all 1993 to 1995 stuff. After that Toxic Turtle debacle, I needed a nice pick-me-up. Instead, I got The Undertaker against Giant Gonzalez. Keep in mind, I paid for this. What does that say about my mental health? Hard camera only again. This match took place the day after their WrestleMania 9 match where Gonzalez tried to smother Undertaker to death with a chloroform rag. I wish I had chloroformed myself before this match. It's really not that long, so it's not that bad, but my God, was Giant Gonzalez a terrible professional wrestler. His selling, I'm not even exaggerating when I say this, he is by far the worst wrestler I have ever seen when it comes to trying to sell a move. Just the way he stumbles and staggers around like a drunk man is embarrassing. He grabs the urn from Paul Bearer, he hits Undertaker with it for the DQ, and then the two of them end up brawling to the back. From the same taping, we then had a dark match with the Smoking Guns, who were not announced by the names Billy and Bart. Actually, they weren't announced by any name before the match because they dubbed over whatever their actual music was with some generic country knockoff. The names they did finally announce them by after the match were Kip Winchester and Brett Colt. Kip Winchester is second only to Chet Cheddarfield of Southpaw Regional Wrestling as the greatest name of all time. In fact, if I ever sire a little monster, boy or girl, doesn't really matter, and I want them to get the living shit beaten out of them on a daily basis, I will name them Kip Winchester, and I will send them to a New York City public school. They wrestled the jobbiest of jobber tag teams from the 90s, Barry Horowitz and Reno Riggins. Match was way too long. Billy pinned Riggins with a bulldog from the top rope that got zero reaction. Shawn Michaels defends the Intercontinental title against Mr. Perfect a mere 2 days after WrestleMania 9, which kickstarted their feud after Shawn attacked Perfect backstage at Caesar's Palace. I recall their SummerSlam match that year in '93 being a disappointment, so I didn't have high hopes for this, considering most of the matches on here are pretty much 5 minutes long or less. This was below even the SummerSlam match. And it's really too bad we never got a classic between these two, because you would think it would be a given. I mean, I know Perfect was never really the same when he came back from the back injury, although he had that one great match at the King of the Ring with Bret Hart. 2 months after this, in fact. So he still had, a decent amount left in the tank, as Mark Henry would say. There was a ref bump. Perfect hit the Perfect Plex, and it was comical how long Shawn had to just lay there and pretend not to be able to escape before a second referee ran in and counted the 3. Didn't even kick out. I mean, that must have been a tight grip that Perfect had on that Perfect Plex. Place went nuts for what they thought was a title change. Mike McGurk announced, and I quote, "Here is your winner and new champion of the World Wrestling Federation Intercontinental title, Mr. Perfect." That's, I guess, the long way of saying it. Bill Alfonso, the original referee, told Earl Hebner, "No, Shawn threw Perfect into me," I guess, for the DQ, but they never announced the DQ, and in fact, Perfect left with the belt. They never made any subsequent announcements, so as far as the people in the building knew, Perfect was the new Intercontinental Champion. I checked the results of this show to see if they rematched them maybe later in the night. They came back out, but they never did. So based on this, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Perfect was a 3-time Intercontinental Champion. So there you go. Now here's a rare one. From the dojos of Tasmania, we had a tryout match for Taz in 1993 as the Tasmaniac, which was the gimmick he ended up using when he first went to ECW later that same year. His opponent here was Scotty Too Hotty, Scott Taylor, going by the name Skippy Taylor. I shit you not, he used Skippy. Like the peanut butter. It's Taz, so you know the drill. Suplex City. He won with an overhead belly-to-belly. Yokozuna against Bret the Hitman Hart in a rematch from WrestleMania 9, May 5th, 1993. Both men headlined for the WWF title on that show, and here they are a month later, and neither one of them is the champion. I always enjoyed watching Bret and Yoko, except their WrestleMania 10 match. I didn't like that one. But I've seen a bunch of their matches from '93, and I don't know, I couldn't even tell you why exactly. They sort of just plodded along, but I enjoyed watching them work together. Bret was the man in 1993. A lot of you, if you listen to the main podcast, you know Bret Hart. If I had to pick a favorite all time, I'd have to pick Bret. And Bret during that 92 to 94 period, especially 93, 94, there was nobody better, I'm sorry. I'm not counting Japan and all these other places, but just Bret was the man. He was absolutely the man. And that's my favorite year of his, too, 93. 93, 92, 94, 97. I've never seen anybody tell as good of a story through his selling, than Bret Hart. He goes for the sharpshooter. Mr. Fuji gets up on the apron for the DQ. Bret attacks him. Fuji was the exact opposite of Bret. He was so old by this point, he couldn't sell for shit. You would hit him and he would just stand there. The two of them beat on Bret with the Japanese flag until Owen Hart made the save. Yoko was about to give him the bonsai when Bret made the save with a chair. They double drop kick Yokozuna out of the ring, and oh my god, he damn near took out the front row when he hit that metal barrier. I thought for sure we were going to have dead bodies strewn all over the front row. The way he crashed into that metal, and this was before we had the black barriers that we have now, which are a lot thicker and heavier. I mean, this was just a thin metal railing, and the way he hit this thing, oh boy. oh boy, was that scary. Sergeant Slaughter served as the special referee for this next match between Money Incorporated and the Mega Maniacs, Hulk Hogan and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. So, like Mandingo after a porno shoot. There's a lot to unwrap here. First of all, Money Inc. lost the tag team titles to the Steiner brothers earlier in the very same show. Now, why they didn't show that one here, I have no idea. There must have been something in the Steiners' contract that said any and all tag team title wins must not be televised, because both times that the Steiner brothers won the WWF tag team belts, which was this night, then they lost them a few days later, then they won them back again at a house show a few days after that, neither of their tag team title wins ever made TV. Second of all, this was taped 24 hours after the King of the Ring in 1993, where Hogan was blinded by an exploding camera and he lost the championship to Yokozuna. I guess his vision miraculously came back by the next day. It's funny seeing Hogan and Beefcake here, because the two of them have been in a war of words recently on Twitter. Their friendship fell apart a number of years back, and now Beefcake is working on a tell-all book and promising to expose certain things about Hulk Hogan. And Hogan's response to all this was to tell Brother Brudai, "Got the bandana glued on tight, get a good lawyer, brother." So, things may get a lot nastier before it's all said and done between those two. But these guys were just, all four of these guys here in this match, they were just out there having fun. Very casual, basic match. Hogan's physical transformation during this period was quite the sight to see. God bless Bobby Heenan for trying to explain it the night before. If you remember King of the Ring, okay, Bobby was doing commentary on that show, and I very vividly remember him explaining that Hogan's leaning out for the match with Yokozuna. He's been trying to get into the best shape he could possibly be in and get faster, and that's why he looks so different. He's leaning out for his match against Yokozuna. He wanted to slim down to increase speed. Babyface Hogan here in this match made sure to bust out a couple of eye gouges and a back rake at one point. He did that in every match. I've always said Hogan was never really a babyface. He was a heel his entire career, masquerading as a babyface. The truth only came out in '96 when he turned on Savage and joined the NWO. Money Inc. brought the briefcase into the ring, but Hogan got it. He dinged DiBiase in the head with it. Irwin then tried to hit Hogan with it, but Slaughter took it away, and he hit Irwin in the head with the briefcase. Then DiBiase. So not only did the referee strike both heels with a foreign object, he then called for the bell and awarded the match by disqualification to Hogan and Beefcake. What a screw job this was. Hogan then posed to Real American for a good 5 minutes, and I'm not going to lie, I love that song, so I sat here marking out like a good, like for a good 5 minutes myself, like I was a kid all over again. Beefcake was completely useless. It's funny now to see him so bitter towards Hogan. And look, I don't doubt that he probably has a lot of dirt on Hogan. Hogan has done a lot of bad shit over the years. He's hardly an angel. But Beefcake should be thanking his lucky stars that he had Hogan as a friend, or he sure as hell would not have been put in this spot, let alone all the characters he played in WCW. Brother Brudai, Booty Man, Zodiac, The Butcher, The Disciple. Not one of them any good. Next up was a Lex Luger against Ludwig Borga match from October 20th, 1993. There's a dude in the front row here during this match who gets so worked up at Borga that he takes his shirt off and he flexes his non-muscles to, I shit you not, a massive pop. Look at this guy. Here, take a look at this. Look at the kid in the glasses next to him. Look how happy he looks. Or she looks, I can't really tell. It was Lex Luger and Ludwig Borga. Of course it sucked. Luger won with the loaded forearm, and then he gave the shirtless guy in the front row with the Sam Roberts haircut a high five. We had Macho Man Randy Savage against Crush, February 1st, 1994. So this was before their Falls Count Anywhere match at WrestleMania 10. Fuji gave Crush a handful of salt. Savage then knocked the salt back into Crush's face, which gave Savage the opening for the flying elbow drop and the win. We had Bret Hart against Jim the Anvil Neidhart for the WWF title at a house show in Montreal. This may have been the only actual house show match on this DVD, and not something from a TV taping. This was from October 21st, 1994. This was cool to see, if for no other reason. It's my first time ever seeing a singles match between the two former Hart Foundation members. And I've got some breaking news here. You're not going to believe this, but This Bret Hart guy was really over in Montreal. I know, right? It's pretty shocking. I mean, I hope you were sitting down when I gave you that bit of news, but it's true. Anvil attacks him before the bell, doesn't even let Bret get his jacket off. Bret immediately puts him in a sharpshooter when Jeff Jarrett runs in and attacks Bret. Talk about random. Jarrett beats him down for a good while until officials come out to restrain him. What I love is that when the bell finally rings, Bret immediately goes on offense and completely no-sells the beatdown that Jeff Jarrett just gave him. And remember what I said before, Bret Hart is one of the best ever when it comes to selling, and even he was like, the hell with this guy. I'm not putting this guy over. Jarrett ended up sitting at ringside on a folding chair watching. Why he was out there? I don't know. It's never explained. I don't know. I guess for the finish, that's why. He got up on the apron, he held Bret for Neidhart, but when Neidhart came off the ropes, Bret ducked, he knocked Jarrett off the apron. Bret then rolled him up for the pin. Cool little piece of nostalgia, Hart Foundation members going at it, but beyond that, not much really to it. Bret from 93 and 94 was the shit, though. I can't say that enough. My favorite period of his matches. Speaking of Jeff Jarrett, the next match was a ladder match for the Intercontinental title against the British Bulldog from May 16, 1995. Cool to see a ladder match that I did not know existed before. Lex Luger came out early on to chase the roadie away from ringside. This was the most exciting thing that happened during this match. This was one of those static hard cam matches, so at one point the action spilled outside into the aisle and we couldn't see what was happening, which was kind of frustrating. All we could see were the empty seats in the crowd, but it's 1995. We know business was not great for WWF in 1995. And this was a small building, too. The fact they had so many scattered empty seats in a small building, not good. Bulldog went to pull Jarrett down off the ladder, but in doing so, Jarrett was able to pull the IC belt down with him to retain the title. Jarrett was the champion, but Jinder Mahal had more heat as WWE champion than Jeff Jarrett had here during this match. So nice, we got him twice. Another Jeff Jarrett ladder match followed, also for the Intercontinental title. This one against Razor Ramon less than a month later, June 5th, 1995, at a high school in Ohio, before an impressive sellout crowd of 1,450 fans here at this Raw taping. And the same night that Bob Holly beat Chris Benoit in one of the tryout matches that Benoit had for WWE that year. They should have put that on this DVD. That and the Bret Hart-Tom McGee match. Scott Hall, if I may say so, best working punch in the business. And that's coming from a Bret Hart and Jerry Lawler fan, or at least a fan of Lawler's punches. Lawler knows how to throw a punch that looks real. John Cena never quite was able to master that art even after all these years. But I think of Bret, I think of Lawler, and I think of Scott Hall. And Scott Hall may well be the very best. Best working punch in the business. This was better than the Bulldog ladder match with Jarrett. Razor had the belt within reach. He was swatting at it when Jarrett tipped the ladder over and Razor crotched himself on the top rope. Then did the not-so-subtle Shawn Michaels spot from WrestleMania 10 where he intentionally gets his foot caught in the rope so he can't escape, and Jarrett climbs up, grabs the belt for the win. Now, Jarrett is stomping him after the match a few times. Hey, Ramon! And he's stomping on him and stomping on him, and he's posing, and you just know that that's not going to go unanswered. There's no way that any of the Clique members, quite frankly, back then during that period, are going to let Jeff Jarrett, kick and stomp them and embarrass them even after the match and let the guy walk off scot-free. And sure enough, that did not happen. Jarrett's in the corner on the ropes. He's posing. Razor sneaks up behind him, grabs him by the arms, and drops him with the Razor's Edge. I thought this was perfectly fine stuff. This next match was a treat. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels as tag team partners. So as weird as it was to see Hogan and Piper on that first disc back in '86 teaming up together as partners, this was probably less weird, but still kind of cool because I don't ever remember seeing this on TV, the two of them being tag team partners. Bret and Shawn against Hakushi and Jerry the King Lawler, rocking quite the mullet here for this match. July 26, 1995, only a few days after Shawn won his third Intercontinental title, beating Jarrett at In Your House. 95 and Bret Hart, 95 was mostly a lost year for this guy. The WrestleMania match he had with Bob Backlund was maybe his worst WrestleMania match ever. I'm just going over them really quickly in my head. And I honestly can't think of a worse WrestleMania match that I have ever seen Bret Hart in. And that includes the 6-second squash of the Bolsheviks at WrestleMania 6. At least that one was brief. And Bret was dominant. He went from that to feud. So he went from the Backlund match at WrestleMania, which was terrible, to feuding with Hakushi. And they actually had a couple of good matches. But he was feuding with Hakushi. He was feuding with Jerry Lawler again in this 2-year never-ending feud. They had the Kiss My Foot match at the King of the Ring that year, which was not good. He went from that to a feud with Lawler's evil dentist. Then he feuded with a pirate who stole his jacket. That was the actual basis of their feud. Jean-Pierre Lafitte stole Bret's leather jacket. And Bret had to get it back. Finally, Bret beats Diesel to win the WWF title at Survivor Series, and then had that excellent title match with the British Bulldog at In Your House to end the year. That was the show in Hershey. But what a god-awful year overall for Bret Hart in 1995. Vince screwed him harder in 95 than he did in 97. So Bret got worked over for about 90% of this match. He was the babyface in peril. I'm sure he loved that. Shawn Michaels finally got the hot tag. Place went nuts for him. And after finally tagging out. So Bret is just getting his ass kicked for 90%, right? Tags in Shawn finally at long last. Shawn comes in, runs wild for about 60 seconds. 90 seconds tops. Tops, okay? So after all that, what does he do? He tags Bret right back in. But, you know, Bret got his win back, I guess. And he's looking fine. And he finished off Hakushi with the sharpshooter. So at least he got to win the match, which is probably why he gave 90% of it up, because he knew he was going to win in the end, so it all worked out. But it was weird seeing these two tagging together, hindsight being what it is. Had their feud happened a few years later than it did, no doubt Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels would have made, or been made, tag team champions. That sort of became the thing to do in WWE, is to pair up two people who hated each other and make them the tag team champs. This was fine, but if you thought that Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels teaming together would make for some kind of amazing match, well, my advice to you, lower your expectations. And finally, we have come to the end here. Come to the end of Disc 3. 44 matches in, number 45, is a steel cage match for the WWF title between Big Daddy Cool Diesel and a morbidly obese Yokozuna. From July 26, 1995, there is an old expression. It's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. Well, we started this disc with Undertaker against Giant Gonzalez. And we ended this disc with Diesel against Yokozuna. To put both of those matches on the same disc is the cruelest of jokes. There was a point in this match where Yokozuna, who had to be every bit of 650 pounds by this point. His ass cheeks had ass cheeks. Each one of those things was its own designated Wi-Fi hotspot, okay? This guy starts climbing the cage. He is climbing the cage. If I were sitting in the first 5 rows on that side of the ring, I would get up and I would leave. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near there, because I don't trust that cage to hold. So he starts climbing, and Jim Cornette is on the outside begging him not to do this. And thankfully, Diesel stopped him, but if we're being honest here, gravity would have stopped him at some point anyway. We got a double clothesline spot, a lot of laying around, very exciting. Both these guys were sucking so much wind, it's a miracle the first 5 rows didn't pass out from oxygen deprivation. Yokozuna started crawling towards the door, so of course Diesel goes to climb out of the ring in the slowest race you've ever seen in your life. Diesel was so slow in getting out of the cage that Yokozuna actually had to hold up because he got outside the door too quickly. Think about that. In a race, Yokozuna beat Diesel in a race. Cornette was literally blocking Yokozuna from having both of his feet touch the floor while they waited for Diesel to drop down for the win. This was awful. And if you thought that a Diesel-Yokozuna cage match was going to be anything other than awful going into it, then I don't know what you were thinking. Now, the one thing is about this and all these matches, I mock, I make fun, but the fact is, these are rare matches that we've never got to see before. That's really the appeal of this entire DVD set. I mean, when all is said and done, It's not really about the quality of the matches as much as it is just the appeal of being able to see rare matches that you've never had the chance to see before. And so you're either going to want to spend your money on that, or you're not going to think it's worth it to spend your money on that. That's really what this decision boils down to. For me, I don't regret making the purchase. I knew I wanted to review this anyway, but I don't regret it either way, because to me, there's a lot of really cool gems on here that I'm glad I was able to go back and see for the first time, and some of it I laughed at, some of it I enjoyed, a lot of it I didn't like, but you get a little bit of everything. I mean, 45 matches, you're going to get a mix of good, bad, and the ugly, and that's really what this DVD set is all about. Now, at the end, how does it end? Charlie Caruso and Sean Mooney are parting ways, and we get a shot when the credits are over of Sean Mooney, who had denied earlier in the DVD, yeah, I don't live here. I just stop by on my days off and just, go through all the old master tapes. Well, we get a shot here at the end of the disc that shows Sean sleeping in the warehouse on the floor. He is snuggling with his Ultimate Warrior wrestling buddy. And you all did the same, okay? So don't judge. Although I had actually I have the Ultimate Warrior wrestling buddy. My younger brother had Hulk Hogan, and I had the Ultimate Warrior. And I still have it somewhere. I don't know where, but there it is. WWE Unreleased Matches 1986 to 1995, despite what the back cover of the DVD says. Overall, I give it a thumbs up, just because of the nostalgia factor. There are a few matches on here that are genuinely pretty good. For the most part, these matches are really not that good. Some of them are downright awful. Some of the camera angles are very frustrating, especially the static hard cam that just doesn't move. The no announcing, like I said, didn't bother me. If anything, I actually kind of liked it. But these are the things that you would have to consider before you pick the DVD up, if you pick it up. That, of course, is entirely up to you, but there you go. And I would like to see them do a Volume 2. I don't know. I feel like there's still so much more material from that 86 to 95 period that I don't want to necessarily just see Volume 2 go from, 96 to 2001 or something like that. I feel like there's still a lot left in those archives that we haven't seen, and there's no reason not to see it. If I had one suggestion, don't bother putting it on DVD. You have a network. I know people get free months and all that. I don't. I've been paying $9.99 since day one. Now, maybe that makes me a moron, but I actually like the network. I like to support the network. I pay for it every month. I want to see them add more and more to it, and maybe it's a collection, right? They have a section of the network, different collections that they cycle out, I think, every month. I would like to see them at the very least add more collections of rare matches, never before seen, never released matches like this, instead of just selling them on a separate DVD. I don't know how their DVD business is doing, but I'm sure it's not as robust as it once was. I mean, look, if their DVDs are selling like hotcakes, then hey, don't listen to me. Just keep selling them. But I feel like this is the sort of thing that really should be migrated over to the network for your paying customers. And maybe there are some old fans who would, subscribe to the network. I honestly don't think it would make that much of a difference in subscriber numbers. But it would be a nice treat for some of the older fans who already pay for content on the network. So that's what I would like to see going forward. Anyway, leave your comments down below if you saw the DVD and want to share your own reviews or your own thoughts or have anything else you'd like to say. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Keep it locked in here. We'll have more bonus Sound Off extra content coming to the channel very soon. Sound Off Gamers, pay-per-view reviews, all that good stuff. Of course, you can listen to the full episodes of the Solomonster Sounds Off each and every Sunday on the Solomonster.com, iTunes, Stitcher, and a whole host of other platforms. I am the Solomonster. Until next time, be well, stay safe, and we'll see you back here again real soon for more Sound Off extra content. Until then, take care, guys.